to never steer me wrong. So lead on, good shepherd, lead on.
Welcome, everyone, to the For His Name's Sake podcast, where we talk about leadership skills for this generation that we can use not only in their church, school, and community, but most importantly, their entire Christian walk. So today, we have with us Chase, youth pastor over at Crosspoint.
That's right.
And so we met last year at your conference, Rise Up, here at Greenville. So just to let everybody know a little bit about yourself, just tell them a little bit about yourself.
So name's Chase Bright. I'm the next gen pastor at Crosspoint Church right here in Greenville, North Carolina. We're a church plant, about 16 years old. And I've been here for about 6.5 years now. I think November will be 7 years. So it's been going good. That's where I'm at.
That's good. And so, over your time, you said you've been here for about 6.5 years. What are some leadership roles that you've had over the years?
Okay, so it kind of started back in high school, maybe, if we can go back that far. I knew God called me to the ministry, specifically a preacher at an early age. I answered a call to full-time ministry at 14 at church camp. But I actually preached my first sermon when I was 12. It was 5 minutes long, so I don't know if it counts. But so as a teenager, with that desire, I'd actually had gotten several opportunities to travel to different youth groups and speak to different youth groups or events and things like that. But it kind of really amped up at college. Went to Southeastern Field Baptist Bible College. I was a youth pastor at a church in college. Interim pastor for about 7 months while a student there. But after graduating, I was a youth pastor at 2 different churches and then a lead pastor at a church outside of New Bern for 4.5 years. And then I came to Crosspoint.
So it sounds like you've been in a lot of different roles, a lot of different areas.
A little bit different positions, yeah.
Yeah. And so over, all that experience you've had and just seeing other people, what is one word that you could describe leadership in?
One word to describe leadership. All right, so I got 2 words. Is that cool?
It's okay.
All right. So the first one is going to be, I read a book years ago by John Maxwell, and he's a leadership guru. Lots of helpful tips there. And he point blank says, I don't know if this is a word for word quote. I think it is, but if it's not, forgive me. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Right.
And as soon as I read that, when I think leadership, I can't get that out of my head. Leadership is influence because it's true. That's the goal, to influence others. Now, if you're asking me personally what I think leadership is, and this is probably not going to be your cookie cutter answer, but to me, leadership, when I hear leadership, I think rebellious, not in the negative sense.
Right.
But what I think makes a good leader is someone who doesn't just go with the flow because that's what they've always done. They're not afraid to change the system, change the rules, or recognize that this is the rule, but I think this might be a better way, so let's try that. So it kind of can come across as rebellious, but to me it's a good, strong leadership quality to not necessarily fit in a box and stay in a box.
That's definitely a different quality than I've usually heard. But it's a good point.
Yeah. So, you can, again, nothing negative, like you don't need to be rebellious and like, well, that's what they're doing. Well, I'm going to do the exact, nothing negative like that, but don't be afraid to think outside the box. At first it might come across as rebellious in the negative sense, but in the long term, if you follow God's will, if he's what you him leading you to do, then it's not rebellious. It's just out of the ordinary.
Right. And, through that, and maybe you've seen people like that, but who are some people that you've looked up to in leadership?
Man, I met him back at Southeastern, and he's actually, this is the second year in a row we have hired him as our staff coach at Crosspoint, Matt Pettit. I don't know if you were able to meet him last year at Rise Up. He was the speaker. But man, Matt, over 30 years of experience, youth pastor, lead pastor, church planner, business coach. He's a leader in every facet of the word. In every area. Awesome motivator. He's one of the guys, like, have you ever talked to somebody and like you hang up the phone with them, like you're just ready to conquer the world? That's Matt.
Yeah.
Every phone conversation is encouraging. At the same time, and he'll call you out, at the same time, but he would be someone I would definitely look up to.
That's awesome. And through all that, and it really made me think about that rebel word now. Like that's stuck in my head. Okay, next time somebody asks me what's leadership, I'm just like rebel.
Rebel, that's right. That's
That's what I
right.
am. But we've been on a purpose series recently. The first week we talked about purpose as an overview in Romans 8.
Okay.
And then this last week we had Eli come on talking about Moses' purpose. And so this week with you, I wanted to kind of focus on Joseph's purpose.
Love Joseph.
And, it's a kind of a lot of ups and downs, Like I remember back in elementary school, in our Bible class, we had to like draw Joseph's lives out. And I just
Okay.
drew a roller coaster.
No doubt.
And that's what I drew. Like, and Joseph was in a little cart, like just woo, and, like loving it up. And I remember that, and that's kind of how we always think about Joseph's life is
Yeah.
like it's kind of chaotic.
Very.
It's really chaotic. But what's so interesting to see throughout the chapters that it talks about Joseph is that he never lost sight of God.
Yeah.
And his purpose, he knew his purpose was set. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And I'm going to read a few verses and give your take on it.
Okay.
And whatever you want to say, heresy, rebel, whatever. But it says in Genesis chapter 45, it says, "And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord to all his house, and ruler over the land of Egypt." This is when kind of the later part of Joseph's life, after the emotional roller coaster is kind of coming to a slow stop. But he's talking to his brothers here, and it said, "It was not you that put me here. Yes, you sold me into slavery. Yes, you were the one who started this and kind of ruined my life to start off with, and be honest with you. But it wasn't you that put me here.
Yeah.
It was God that put me here."
Yeah.
And I think Joseph pointing that out just really shows that he was faithful and held on to God
Absolutely.
through his entire life.
Is it that chapter or the next one where the conclusion he says, you meant it for evil, but God
Right.
meant
Yeah.
it for good.
Mm-hmm.
If that don't tie into Romans 8, bro,
Right.
I don't know what would. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just just personally, like you think about Joseph's life and like how can that impact somebody? Like looking at Joseph's life, how can that touch somebody? Like how looking at his purpose.
Man, there's so many parts of this story that it's almost like they each have their own individual lesson. If I go in the past a little bit, when I was pastoring at Cove City, I preached a sermon series actually through the life of Joseph, and the title was "Overcoming Every Obstacle." And I mean that was his life. It just, like you said, the roller coaster, was obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and he overcome every single one. He's almost like a picture of Jesus. Just absolute integrity in his life. Maybe the one today, if I had to zero it in, would be the instance with Potiphar's wife. Obviously she was trying to seduce him, and we see that in a lot in today's world with a lot of different things. And today's world's all about follow your heart, follow your passions. And so maybe looking at Joseph and the integrity that he had, knowing that it was wrong, knowing that it was dishonoring to God, stayed true to God and faithful, and kept his purity, which in turn kept his testimony.
Right.
So maybe in today's world, I think all of us probably need to do a little bit better job at protecting our testimonies.
And I think it interesting as well, like that's what I was thinking about, that, he didn't stay that, but he ran. And that's what a lot of
ran.
people, like it's a really like little part of the verse, but it's like he ran.
He ran.
And he didn't just, like whatever, I'm leaving, but no, he went as fast as he could, as
Yeah.
far away as he could.
It carries the idea of what Paul say: flee. Get out of Dodge, get out of there, flee youthful temptations and lust, and
Right.
that's what he did.
Right.
We have the tendency to like take a step back and try to control it or try to handle the situation ourselves. But you're right. That's a good point. He ran. He got out of there.
And like that kind of makes me think like how as leaders can we fight like our lustful temptations?
Man, accountability partner is huge for me. I preach that to our teenagers all the time. I have one myself. What kind of temptations we're talking about, man?
Like maybe, like lusting after money or maybe
Okay.
someone.
A little greed, a little
Yeah.
envy. Okay.
Right. Maybe, like you wish you were that like I feel like in leadership, it's like,
Yeah.
especially like for young people and especially like I've noticed this at college, and I feel like we were all at this point, at some point, like, I want to be like that dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like like, and it's almost like for some people it's like, okay, like you want to like kind of model yourself, but like some people it's like, I want to be him,
Right.
instead of,
Right.
which the whole point, and we've talked about on here before, like, don't be like other people, be what Jesus was. Like,
Be a rebel.
follow, yeah, be a rebel. There you go. There's the answer. New podcast episode, a rebel.
There you go.
But, not modeling yourself after someone else, but modeling it after Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a very easy temptation to go into, like, especially if, I remember someone comes in, preach chapel at Bible college, like, man, they got it. They're awesome, amazing, killer speaker. Look at their ministry, it's successful. And it's easy to want to emulate them and then maybe talk to them what principles or practices they do and just try to make it your own. But that's just, it might work for a little bit. And, you might see growth or you might see spiritual growth. But unless you're willing to become the leader that God has created you to be, I don't think anybody's going to see their potential.
Right.
Because God has given each of us certain abilities, capabilities, talents that we have to be willing to dive into, even the ones we don't really like or wish we could change. He gave them to us for a reason.
Right.
And if we want to be a leader, I think that's just, we got to give into it.
Right. And because it's all part of his purpose.
It's his purpose, man.
And, in Romans 8, we talked about all things work together according to his purpose. And the beginning part of that chapter, it was kind of addressing Christians and non-Christians. But when it gets to verse 28, it talks about to them that love God. And you would think, that is hitting on most, basically Christians.
Yeah.
Because, non-believers are not going to love God. And if they do, they don't love him in the right way.
Correct.
And if we love God, and it kind of points back to not only Moses last week, but Joseph, of that no matter how low he was, in prison, when he was sold into slavery, when he was tempted, no matter through all that, or when, when he was in prison and the people forgot about him, they're like, we got you. And then they went up and didn't say anything. Like through all that, he was still faithful. And because he loved God in his whole, and that's what he held on to. It wasn't his purpose or what he wanted, but it was what God wanted for him.
Yeah.
And that faithfulness eventually where he got to in his life, the second in command.
Second, bro.
And that's a pretty amazing accomplishment to go from slavery to second in command.
No doubt.
I don't think any of us were probably going to go from that,
Yeah.
But just thinking about that, and then that last verse, what really stuck out, and I think is a main point, is that it wasn't y'all that put me here. It wasn't his family. Yes, my family sold me into slavery, and that was the chain reaction that started everything. But it wasn't you that did this. It was God.
Yeah.
And yes, you might have done the action, but God was the one who planned that to happen. God was the one who planned you to even, all of us to be born.
Yeah.
And I think, it's amazing truth in all of our lives that everything that happens is part of God's plan.
Yeah.
And it all points back to God's plan.
Yeah.
And that his plan shows us our purpose. And
Yeah.
looking at that, seeing how Joseph said that, how you could say in our lives, can we see God's purpose?
Man, it's everywhere if you're just willing to stay close to him. I think you hit on it. The idea of loving God, man, and living for him, not because you have to, not because it's the right thing to do or because you're in a position where you want to give the appearance that that's what you do, but because it's actually a personal intimate relationship that you don't just love God, you desire God. You desire more of Jesus in your life. And I think when you get to that point, his purpose for you is going to be evident. Now, there's going to be times, and I'm certain Joseph had it, where you're wondering, like, what the heck, God? Like, what in the world? Like, when his brothers threw him in the pit, like, where's his dream now? Or, he's in slavery, he's in prison. Where's this promise now? Me personally, my wife and I, we struggled with infertility 4.5 years and told it would never happen. And just trying to find God's purpose in that, I still don't have an answer other than his timing is perfect. His plan is perfect. So I think it's one of those things that sometimes we have to be okay and accept the idea that we may never understand God's purpose, his reasoning, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like why he does or why he allows things to happen. But I do believe we have to be okay with it, and accept that even through that horrible time or that trying time, he still has a plan. And if you love him, it's for your good.
Right. And just like Moses and Joseph, that they both loved God and they accepted his call for their lives.
Absolutely.
At the end of in Romans chapter 8, in that verse 28, it says they're called according to his purpose. What we've been saying, not our own purpose, not our plans, but his plans.
Yeah.
And walk down his paths that he wants us to walk down rather than what we want.
Yeah.
And I feel like all of us have came to a point, like you shared, that there's been something in our life that, it's not going the way that we want it to go.
Yeah.
Like this is what we want, and, like all humans are, we want it now. But look at Joseph's life and how long he had to wait in his life, and not even just waiting, like, we would be suffering on the inside, but I mean, he was in a prison cell,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, just imagine probably the torture that he went through, not only on the physical, but the mental side of things.
Mental, man. Yeah.
And even the spiritual side of things. But the point was he held to God and loved him. And I feel like that's a lesson for all of us to, even though we may not understand what God has in store for us, we have to just hold fast to him.
Absolutely.
Because in Romans chapter 8, it talks about the hope that we have not yet seen.
Yeah.
And the thing is, well, if you've already seen hope, then is it really still hope? Like, okay, if you've seen the thing that you're hoping for, then why are you hoping anymore?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the point, like, to close off today, that we still hope that God's going to make all things right. As it talks
Absolutely.
about that, maybe it didn't go how we wanted it to go, but we hope that whatever happens, that's what God wanted to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something we can all take home, is that hope that God, will make all things right, but that it'll all work out for his good and not our own.
Okay.
But I just want to thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, dude.
I'm glad you came on. Excited for you want to give a little spiel about Rise Up?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, man. So started off 2 years ago. So this will be our third year. We do a Rise Up student conference at Cross Point. It's a multi-church, so it's not just for Cross Point. They're just the host. 6th through 12th grade. This year, man, this is going to be the first time I've actually announced it, so I don't know the dates right off the top of my head. But it's going to be in November. It's always in November, and it's looking like this year, man, November 7th and 8th is so Friday night and Saturday. It's an awesome time, man, right here local. Just time the kids can come and praise and worship, hear about Jesus, play games. The kind of the goal behind it was like a mini camp in a weekend,
Right.
Friday night and Saturday. So it's a blast, man. God's been blessing it. Last year, 2024, we had 24 teenagers get saved.
That's awesome.
And we saw several of those throughout the churches follow, getting baptized and getting discipled. So I mean, it's just, man, I'm stoked. I'm looking forward so much for this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait for it. I'll be there.
Yes, sir. Awesome.
But thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
And hope to see everyone next week. And just so everybody knows, I finally sent the book in. So after a year, 5 months, and 27 days, and about 12 hours and 43 minutes. So, but it's in. So thank you all for coming on today, and I hope to see y'all next week.
Good shepherd, I'll follow all